Welcome viewers to another episode of American Reef. As you can see, we're back at Wet Pets and Friends. And today what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time with Brian talking about the discus fish that we saw last time. Talk a little bit about the breeding, care of, etc. So let's go take a look and see what Brian has to say. So again, always thank you for the time.
Oh, thanks for having us. I really appreciate it.
It's all good. So, breeding we talked about last time.
Yeah.
I figured today, like we were talking about earlier, if you can go a little bit, how do you breed? Why do you breed? Because again, as reefers, we all want to do things.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's fun. People take it to the next level, and that breeding's. Now we talked about before how it's not too hard to keep them, and it definitely isn't. Breeding is another story, and that's why discus are expensive. It's a big time challenge, which reef keepers seem to like challenges. And again, if you're keeping a successful reef, I still feel that you'd be able to successfully do this. It's basically a couple just different, and it's like anything else in a hobby. It's not rocket science, but it's just some little details that if you're never told it, you would never think of it, and once you're told it, you're like, it makes sense.
Right, sure.
The biggest thing with breeding, the difference is we do need to worry about not only the nitrates, ammonia, nitrites, and but we also start dealing with hardness. Okay. And the reason why is the eggs stay permeable longer if the water is softer. So the sperm will penetrate the egg long. If that male's being a little sluggish behind the female and not getting over them eggs as fast as she's laying them, the longer they can stay permeable, the more fertilization will happen. Yeah. So we try to keep, for instance, my show tank upstairs, the hardness is probably 800 parts per million. Really? Down here I have it about 50. Okay. Which is a huge difference.
Yes, it is.
I try to keep it between 50 and 90 parts per million for successful hatch rate. Okay. pH, we do drop it down lower, closer to 6. Okay. At temperature, I do stay about 84 degrees. Okay. So those are the three biggest things. If you do that, and then if you could do all three of those, which again still doesn't take a lot to do that. The only difference would be using RO water instead of tap water. Right. So once
everybody doing reef is doing
that. And they're already doing that. You already have it in your house, so it's not another purchase. Right.
And well, I was going to say, one of the things that right off the bat that kind of jumped to me, the tanks are small tanks, right? So it doesn't take a lot of space.
No, we don't want a lot of space. We want to keep the pairs more confined. The biggest reason is once those babies are hatched, it's one of the, I believe, only 4 fish in the world that feed their young. So we want close quarters so when the babies do hatch, they can find the parents and attach and start feeding off the body slime, which gives them their vitamins and minerals and protein. So as a result of that, we do the smaller tanks. Okay. So usually I do a 20-gallon tanks, plenty for a mated pair of discus, even a big pair like some of these are. Sure.
And so you do that to paint the sides so they can't see outside?
Yes, and then we do that to keep it more just protective in there. They just feel more calm. And when you notice, we do the white sides because the babies go after darker objects. So if you have black painted tanks or blue, it's harder to find the parents.
Oh, okay.
So even the lighter fish, like a white one, when they're feeding, darken up a little bit, and those parent babies are able to find them easier.
Oh, very cool. So again, if you're going to start a breeding kind of system,
basically what you would do is just set up a bare bottom tank, and that's important. Strictly bare bottom for sterilization. We do put a breeding cone in there which simulates what they breed on in nature, which are reeds, vertical, anything vertical in a tank they're going to want to breed on. And we use the terracotta color because that's similar to the color of the reeds that they breed on in nature. So that's the purpose of the breeding cones that are in the tank. So all we basically do, bare tank, the temperature, parameter, pH and hardness, what I said, temperature at 84, pH around 6, hardness around 50 to 90 parts per million. And then just feed them well, do your water changes, and they'll eventually breed.
I was going to say, how do you get them to coats?
Yeah, basically keeping up with your water changes, keeping them well fed, and keeping your water good. And after that, if I see a pair has been a couple weeks and hasn't spawned, you can trigger them by starting to feed them a little bit more of the live blackworm, live food. Okay. That seems to be a big trigger. Okay. One other natural trigger effect is the storm fronts and stuff will come in. The barometric pressure change will trigger them.
Really?
Best times of year is springtime and fall time. I've found myself because of that change in the atmosphere. It really triggers them.
And now, if say you have a breeding pair, after they breed, when can they breed again?
Well, they would actually spawn every 7 to 10 days, but because we let them feed their young, which you don't have to, you can feed them artificially, but that's another whole show going on that, and it's a nightmare. It's a lot of work.
Right.
But I feel they grow quicker and better and hardier, get more immune systems passed on from the parents by doing the natural feeding. So what will happen is they'll spawn in about 3 days, the eggs will hatch. In another 3 days, they feed off a yolk sac during the next 3 days. Once that's gone, they go free swimming in search of food, which they'll find the parents. And what we call attaching, they grab onto the parents and literally bite their sides and feed off of them, which is pretty amazing. Not too many people have the pleasure of seeing that, which you will now.
Right, exactly.
But then I'll let them usually with the parents for about 2 to 4 weeks. Then after 2 weeks, I start feeding them artificial food so they get used to feeding it. And as they're getting bigger, they start actually could make sores or blisters on the sides of the parents from continually biting at them and feeding off them. So, So for both reasons, we start after 2 weeks feeding them some of our artificial foods and getting them used to it. Then I'll pull them from the parents and then put them in their own isolation tank. Okay, so we talked earlier, you have different stages, which is really cool. We do, yes, yeah. We showed you the egg where the pair had just spawned last night, and then the other pair, which had the babies that just went free swimming and attached to them last night, and then we have the ones that are a couple weeks old over there. So now, okay, from the time that they spawn over there, and we'll kind of show that video. Yes, okay. How long between that egg until you see something that's swimming around? Okay, it'll be 3 days. From the time they spawn, it'll be usually 36 hours at the temperature and parameters I told you. And then it usually takes another 36 until they go free swimming to the parents. Okay, so the ones that you just showed, like these ones up here. Yes. Those are 6 days old. They just went free swimming last night, which I thought they would, and I came in this morning and they were on the parents. Which I came down the stairs with my fingers crossed and they were on it. So I was pretty happy. Now, what do you do if they don't? Sometimes I'll come down, and even though they got them all to that point and spend 6 days with them, they'll be gone. They'll actually eat them. Some of your younger pairs will do that more often than not. And what I actually do, most discus for some reason tend to eat their eggs, but I actually use a screen to cover the comb until they hatch. And for some reason, once you get them to their actual hatched live babies, they seem to not bother them. So then I'll pull the screen and let them tend to them from there. So, and like I said, younger inexperienced pairs, you don't get a very good hatch rate, so don't get frustrated. Okay, when you say very good hatch rate, give us a good hatch rate would be 80 to 90% of the eggs hatching. Bad would be 10% hatching. And younger pairs look closer to only 10 or 20% hatching. And then even from that point, out of that 10 to 20% that hatches, you may only end up with 10% of them to the point where they're actually, get to 2-inch fish. Just weaker ones that just don't get enough to eat, or just weaker just to drop off. So you hope to get the biggest spawns as possible to end up with maybe out of 150 egg spawn, end up with 100 sellable discus. Hopefully it's a good, successful spawn. So now, you just said 100 sellable discus. Yeah. How many days from when they're the little egg to a sellable discus? That still takes a long time, and a lot of people think, well, if you're raising them now instead of buying them, are they going to be cheaper? And I actually do sell them cheaper, but it's still a lot of time and money and water changes and food, because to answer your question, it usually takes probably 3 to 6 months until they're sellable.
That's a lot.
So that's a long time.
Right, exactly.
And that's why they're expensive.
Sure, sure.
So it's a lot of time spent.
I was going to say that, they're beautiful.
It is. They really are. They're beautiful fish.
You want to talk about something very therapeutic to watch?
It is, because they're very peaceful, not racing erratically all over the tank. Very calming, soothing, peaceful. Yes, yes, I agree.
Okay, so again, I'm a reef guy, and I'm going to get into the discus. Right?
Yeah.
And I decide, first of all, after I get my tank, I'm going to breed them.
Okay.
Right? And I have my tank, well, too small, painted.
Yeah.
Filtration-wise, what do you?
Well, you could go as simple as just a hydro sponge filler.
Really?
And I did used to do that in the old days.
Really?
And you can still, many people do it even to this day. No problems whatsoever, but
How do you maintain?
you need to do more water changes, probably 50% a day.
Okay.
40 to 50% a day. I actually set up this system similar to my systems upstairs,
Right.
and actually have a refugium running it.
Right.
So again, because I feel it gives you the highest quality of water
Sure.
and least amount of work involved combined. So time, quality, and control all in one shot. Why not do it?
That's right.
Yep.
Okay, so again, if they choose to water changes, that's fine. If
Yes.
it's sponge, that's fine.
Yes. And if you only have one tank, one pair, just do a hydro sponge.
Sure.
Or you could even do an outside power filter, but the only problem with that be when they're spawning, sometimes that heavy current can wash the sperm away
Right.
from the egg. So I either shut it off or try to keep the spawning site away from the current, which I even do in here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I noticed you can hardly see current.
Yes, yeah, and that's why I have the stems on the returns underwater. But you'll see I have the spawning sites pushed back about 6 to 8 inches away from where the water comes in the tank,
Right.
to keep that sperm, on the eggs
Sure,
instead of
sure,
blowing
so
all over
blown
the water.
away,
Yeah.
right? And
So-
now, okay, like you said upstairs, your goal for any filtration upstairs is 10 times an hour. You're going to
Yes,
rotate it.
yes, we do
What's
like
your
that.
goal here?
I'm doing 10 times an hour.
Are you really?
I still go after that just because I'm worried more about the quality, and as long as you go with the long enough tank, and that's why I choose the 20 longs, it allows you to have your current up front and your cone way in the back, the breeding cone.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, let's take a break for our sponsors, and then we'll come back.
Sure.
Okay, so we're back. So we were talking a little bit about some of the things we didn't cover, like lighting, food,
Yeah.
and all
Okay. I do when I'm breeding them, and you'll see it is kind of dim back here.
that. Although we do have the lights.
Yes, we even have some of your lights in here,
Right.
but usually I keep just an overhead light on. They don't like that direct light over the tank, especially when it's bare and white sides.
Right.
The reflective light, it kind of make them too skittish.
And do you shut it off at night?
I do unless they have babies.
Okay.
So if they have babies, I won't necessarily leave the overheads on, but I'll leave a night light on somewhere.
Okay.
Because I've learned over the years, again, I don't know why, because of nature, it gets pitch black at night, but for some reason, if you shut off the lights sometimes in the morning, when you flick it on, the pair panics, they fell asleep, they woke up, there's babies in there, they'll hurry up and start eating them.
Got it.
Some won't, some will, I don't take the chance, so
Sure,
I
sure.
leave a night light on.
Sure.
Food, I do keep that pretty much the same. The tetra bits, the hikari frozen bloodworms, and occasional live blackworms.
Can I get
And
30 seconds?
Yeah, I do. Same thing. And
Okay.
the one big difference, once you have a mature pair of fish, you would think they would need more food because they're breeding, especially if you're breeding.
Right.
But even aside from that, just because they're bigger now,
Right.
but you actually, once they're done growing, once a day, I do feed the pairs just once a day.
Really?
Some people would argue that, say 2 to 3, and I wouldn't argue that.
Right.
So anywhere from 1 to 3 feedings would be fine on
Right.
the pairs. I try not to do 3 because of the excess weight.
Sure,
load.
sure.
So they don't really need it.
Yeah.
So, but then when I want to trigger a pair, if they haven't spawned, I said I will go a little heavier.
Yeah.
Instead of feeding the pellets and blood frozen, I'll throw in like 3-4 days in a row of just live food, and it usually gets them to spawn.
So it's sort of like taking your wife out to dinner.
Yeah, that's right.
Something about that
Yeah,
whole pal.
yeah, that's right. And to
Okay.
follow up on that, the reason why I don't like feeding live blackworms all the time is because they could get some internal flukes or parasites or bacterial infections from the blackworms if that's all you fed. I don't like doing that.
Okay,
So.
makes sense. And now, like we were talking about the other fish, some are hardier, some are not, mixed match.
Yes.
How does that work?
It is. I'm glad you brought that up because as far as keeping them, I found no difference in hardiness, but as far as breeding them, some of the more rare, delicate strains, they're tougher to get the higher hatch rate out of and actually raising babies, getting them to attach to the body of the parents, it becomes more difficult, and that is why they're more expensive too. It's harder and more involved. And what I actually do, which is people find this interesting, some pairs, like for instance the white butterflies, because they're so light, babies tend to go to darkness, like I said, that's why we do the white background. Sometimes even with the white background, they don't want to go to the parents because they're so light. Albino species, they won't seem to produce enough slime coat to feed the babies. They won't even go to them at all. So I've actually foster parented a lot of species. The best ones that produce the most slime seem to be the darker fish. Blue diamonds, the darker red fish, pigeon bloods, red melons, blue diamonds. So I'll take a spawn, and it's even a little bit more involved. You try to condition each pair at the same time and try to get them spawned within days apart of each other. I'll swap the cones and let them, the blue diamonds, raise their babies.
They don't know any different.
So it's pretty neat.
That is very cool, right?
So it works pretty well, right? 90% success rate doing that.
Yeah, I was going to say, in my mind when you said that, I was thinking, you'd get them when they were live or something like that. And
now it's easier just right from the egg. And although sometimes, if I couldn't line it up right, I will take babies, tuck them out with a turkey baster, and put them in with a spawn with another pair if they're not feeding good or the babies are scattering.
That'll still work?
Yes.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so like we did upstairs, right? Let's take a second now and kind of go over the different pairs that you have.
Sure.
And maybe little facts about breeding.
Yeah, no problem. And I was telling you upstairs, I'm trying to do more of the solid strains in the store and then importing the more striated, spotted strains. Simply because the Asians, I don't know how they do it, and I give them all the credit in the world because I'll get their babies in hormone-free, because people want to say, well, they're hormone. They're not. They just seem to have, even at a younger age, full body pattern or better color than my babies will have, even though I'm breeding Asian discus. So I went towards the solids because they'll show true good color even when they're young, no vertical bars. So over here I have a blue diamond pair with the young on their backs right now. And you can even see how dark this pair is because they're starting to produce that mucus. And how light this pair is that doesn't have any babies yet.
So they are the same?
Same exact pair. This pair is a white butterfly, which is a real high-end strain. They originated, I believe, in China. That's one of my favorite species of strains of all the discus.
Why?
It's just always been fascinating to me. And some people like the more solid, like this female is, and some people, and I prefer the contrast of the red pattern in the fins and face with a white background. I just like it because if you have, most discus have all this color. And if you have blues and reds and spotted stripes and then throw in a white discus, it just pops from across the room. You can see that fish. So I love them. Over here, there's striated or spotted white butterfly, which is another version. And then over here, the yellow Millennium Golds that I talked about upstairs. Over here, the white-faced super red melons. And then down here is a really neat combination, which is albino San Mara, which is the female, and a male super red melon. And what's neat about this pair is I had tried albino to albino and successfully they fertilized and hatched, but like I was saying earlier, the babies were going all over the tank and were not feeding. And they claim, from what I've heard, the albinos, or at least anybody that I've talked to so far, had the same problem. That they won't find the parents, and even if they do, the parents aren't producing enough slime coat. So I tried to pick a strain that had almost similar, identical characteristics to the albino, which I chose the super red melon. and so far this is my first successful spawn with them, so I'm very stoked about it. And it's neat. I don't know if you could catch it on film or did capture it, but you can even see some of the lighter babies, which I hope to be the albinos, and some of the darker babies, which are probably the red melon. And then I may even get a mixture of some babies, which is exciting too.
Yeah, it's funny because until you said that, right? But now that you said that, you definitely can. And those are 6 weeks?
These are a little over 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
That is cool. Very good. So now, again, as far as like comparison, do they all breed about the same?
They do. It's probably the closest cycle if you pull the eggs, or if they eat them, it's about every 7 to 10 days.
Okay.
But again, some of the more delicate strains like the white butterflies and the yellow millenniums, they seem to only want to spawn maybe once a month at best.
Okay.
Or at least I've found that to be so far.
So if you're a reef hobbyist getting into...
Yeah, I would probably recommend the easiest strains to start out with and breed would be cobalts, red turquoise, blue diamonds are good, Marlboro reds or red melons.
Very good. Now, when you first started breeding, how long did it take you until you went from...
Well, let's put it this way. I started when I was like 5 years old. So before we opened the store, my dad always had fish and bred a lot of fish way back in the 60s. Angelfish in particular, severums, and he did have wild discus that paired off, and he had some success here and there. But then my brother and I, once we hit grade school, we really got into it with them, and by the time we were in middle school, we had 120 tanks at home, and we're breeding discus, angelfish, everything under the sun. Severums, cory cats, plecos, rams, bettas, you name it. So we really just have a passion for it. But until just, I would say, within the last, think of me, probably 30 years of trial and error to even find out some of the tricks I just told you in this conversation we've had.
So everybody out there, realize that's 30 years of experience by this year, which is cool, and I appreciate it very much.
Like I said, I appreciate you coming in here and checking out everything. We like sharing it with everybody.
That's good, and obviously, that's why I say, if you're in New Murray, check them out, You'll see Brian. Say hi, Brian. How you doing? Show me some discus.
Yeah, there we go.
What are we going to talk about next time?
Maybe we could do the filter room, and then I'd love to talk to you about the reef tank and that. Sure.
Sounds good. So stay tuned. Again next week for another video brought to you by American Reef. As I've said, in so many episodes, please give our sponsors the chance to earn your business. Doesn't mean you have to give it to them. You can to earn it. And if they do good by you, then continue to support them, because obviously they're doing good by us by sponsoring us and allowing us to create these videos. Until next week, thanks again for watching American Reef. Okay, through the miracle, of technology, we're going to add one segment that we forgot to talk about. We started putting lids on these.
We do, and I chose this, like you said, for expense and convenience. Just go into the regular hardware store, lighting store, and get the egg crate. Cut out some holes for feeding. I try to keep the holes away from where the current is, so it doesn't blow the food all over. It'll drop straight down. It lets the tear breathe and evaporate, and lets light penetrate too. So all the way around, it's just a real nice, cheap, easy, functionable lid system for you.
And so again, if you're going to start one up, make sure you have something, because you don't want to take those.
They can, especially when the pairs, they don't necessarily fight. Just breeding activity, mating rituals, they lock lips and sometimes push and shove.
They're doing their thing,
and I've come down in the past and found a very expensive mated pair, one or the other, on the floor, and I would never let that happen again.
No weights on them? So
it's enough to keep them in there.
Very good. Okay, so again, don't forget, cover them up.
Cover them up.
Cover it up.